you guys for coming over. Listen, I think to start off, first let me give you a little background on how we have been working with the mayor's office to put this budget together this year. We have had multiple meetings with the mayor's office. I've had several personal meetings with the mayor. I think one thing that everybody understands, or at least needs to understand, is that this financial crisis is a result of a lot of things that are happening even outside of Jacksonville. This is not a problem that was created by the mayor. It's not a problem that was created by the council, the city council, or the sheriff's office, or the fire department. But we face a crisis with our expenses and our revenue. This is not just an expense problem. It's also a revenue problem. And what I'd like to do for this afternoon is kind of go through first how we're going to attack some of the expenses, and then talk about the revenue. Now, to go through that, I'm going to ask if Les will give each of you, we have a list of our 2013 budget reductions. And what you will see here is there's a total of 319 positions that we are eliminating, both vacancies and people. Now, many of you remember last year we cut 129 positions. This year we carried many vacancies to make our budget for this year, because you remember we were cut over and above what we had already cut last year, so we had to maintain some vacancies through this year to reduce our expenses, and we're now cutting those vacancies as well. So you can see we have an elimination. We're starting with the proposed cuts that we gave the mayor's office back in July, which was 154 positions. We were cutting 60 police positions, 20 corrections, and 74 civilian positions. Then you can see there's a list of items here, operational issues that we were cutting: uniforms, safety equipment, tuition for recruit classes, reduction in hardware and software maintenance for computers, that sort of thing. Just this whole list. I'm not going to read all that. You can see that for yourself. But then it gets to two big cuts. One is closing of our Community Transition Center and eliminating 78 positions. That's 69 correctional positions and 9 civilian positions. And we're assuming closure of that facility by August 24th. And the reason for that is if we're going to close it, if we go ahead and close it early, close it in August, we can actually save some money this year to help fill the revenue need for next year. And so by doing that early, August 24th, we can actually enhance our savings. Secondly, and you see that's $4.3 million for CTC. Now, then we're also going to eliminate the Community Service Officer program for a total of 71 positions. And again, that is assuming that if we're going to go ahead and cut it, let's cut it in August and create additional savings this year. And so we did that. That's $3.3 million. We also had carried extra police vacancies throughout the year because we have to have positions to put our cops more officers into when they roll off of the grant next year. We had saved 40, we only need 30, so we're going to cut 10 of those vacancies. And so that's another $794,000. So that was the original $11.5 million that we offered to the mayor's office. Then the pension actuarial came back. The city's pension hole grew. Not only is the pension increase just in my budget $27 million, the city's also facing a $24 million revenue shortfall as a result of property taxes going down. So they came back to us with that need. And so we said, okay, we'll go back to the drawing board and let's see what we can cut and save to help fill that hole. They said they wanted us to get somewhere around, well, it started out at 15 million, then it jumped to 22 million. So we said, okay, we went back and we cut a few more positions. You can see we cut 2 CO, correctional officer positions. We eliminated 3 police officer positions, a police legal advisor. We unfunded a chief, an assistant chief. We cut overtime for our special events, $700,000. Look, these are events where people are generating revenue. If those special events want traffic control, they're going to have to pay for it. It's not coming out of my budget. They need to pay for that service. And so we're gonna stop providing that service. Eliminate reimbursable overtime from the stadium. When I force officers to work under Fair Labor Standards Act, I have to pay them time and a half. The providers only want to pay whatever amount they pay. They don't want to pay the time and a half rate. So because I would have to order officers to work, I would make up the difference between what they paid and what the overtime rate was. That's that to the tune of $78,000 a year. I'm no longer going to do that. In addition to that, when we close CTC, and I want to clarify this because there's been some bad misinformation put out on this program. CTC is the small jail down here on Washington Street. That's where our drug treatment program is, Matrix House. It's one of the best in-jail drug treatment programs in the country. And in fact, I'll provide you some, these are some recidivism numbers for that. And if you look, you will see their recidivism is running about 17% in 2010, where the regular population is about 40%. Amazing reductions in recidivism. Amazing positive impact in people's lives, but quite frankly, I can't afford to continue to run that program. So we're going to close CTC. Now, Ken Jefferson reported to you guys that that had something to do with the reentry center. It does not. That is not the reentry center. That is Journey, and that's located over on Superior Street. This is completely different. But I'll pass these out to you as well. So you can see just how important that program is. And it's a very effective program. And I hate to cut it, but I've got to have officers on the street. So that's what CTC is. The Community Transition Center is about our drug treatment program. It is not about felony reentry coming back from the state prison system. Now, when we eliminate that facility and we eliminate Matrix House, which is the name of the drug treatment program, we have the city has a $1.5 million contract with River Region Human Services to actually do the drug treatment. So that's another $1.5 million that we'll be able to save by closing this facility. Not only do we save all of the officer expenses, but we also save $1.5 million or $1.4 million that we're paying to River Region for the drug treatment. We cut an additional $200,000 out of our fleet for next year. You can see here, there's another, this is when we decided to cut CTC and the CSO program early. By cutting that early, we save an additional almost $600,000. So instead of waiting till October 1st and cutting it August 24th, we can actually save $600,000. So we did that. Then, as a result of some other savings that we've had in our budget this year, we have $5.1 million that we're giving back to the city. In fact, I had introduced an ordinance to give this money back earlier, but they said to wait, so they may just take it back at the end of the year. But we have $5.1 million that we're trying to get back to the city now. So those are the additional proposed budget reductions and savings. Then we also looked at the fact that the red light cameras will be up and running. We got an estimate from red flex, and we think we're going to draw somewhere around $1.5 million in revenue on that. So we show that as being available to help reduce that hole in the city budget. All of that comes to a total of $22 million. Now, you can see where we have a summary of the eliminated positions. If you look in the left-hand column, you see the number of positions that are being cut, and on the right-hand column is the actual number of people that are being laid off. So this year, in this year's budget, we're cutting 74 police positions, but you can see all of those were vacant because we had to carry those vacancies this year so we can make this year's budget. Now we're cutting all of those. Then we have 91 correctional positions, 58 of which are staffed by correctional officers today. They will lose their jobs. Then we have 154 civilian positions, 72 of which are people who will get laid off. So we will eliminate 319 positions and 130 people will actually be laid off. Now, just to put this in context, when you look at what we did last year we cut $17.7 million. This year we're cutting $22 million. We're cutting over 10% of our budget in 2 years. I don't think there's another agency out there that has made those kind of cuts. In addition to that, last year, as you remember, we eliminated 45 police positions where people actually got laid off, 29 civilian positions that actually got laid off, for a total of 74. So in a 2-year period now, we will have laid off 204 people while cutting 319 total positions. Now, another thing that's been reported that I want to clarify, I will provide you the list of the 319 positions, and I'll let you look at that. And what you will see is these positions run the gamut from the top of this organization to the bottom. Now, we explained this last year, but in the RIF process, in a reduction of force process, what happens is when I eliminate a ranking officer position, like chief of, for example, our chief of community affairs, or chief of continuous improvement. When I eliminate that position, there's a cascading effect. That chief has reversion rights, so he will be bumped down to assistant chief. Then that assistant chief is bumped down to lieutenant. Then that lieutenant is bumped down to sergeant. And that sergeant is bumped down to patrolman, and a patrolman is then riffed. So you always are laying off the lowest level because of this cascading effect. Even though the cut is at the top, and I'm eliminating a chief's position, it's a patrolman that's going to lose a job, because it all rolls down, it cascades down, per civil service rules. So you can see on these 319 positions, I heard it reported incorrectly, I might add, so I want to clarify this, because again, this is a patrolman who thinks he knows what happens in the administrative levels of this organization. He intimated that we had grown our appointed ranks by 30%, and we were cutting all the people at the bottom. That is not true. He assumes that all appointed people are on my staff. They're not. The increase in appointed staff are the medical people that we hired over in corrections when we did away with that almost $11 million medical contract by a private provider. When we hired those nurses and those technicians, they became appointed people in my organization. We did not increase my staff, my appointed staff, by 30%, and nor are all the cuts at just the lower level, as you can see here. So I want to make that clarification. So these are the 319 positions that are actually being eliminated. Now there are other positions that are being, well, let me break this down for you. So of that 319, I mentioned the 130 that are actually losing their job. This is this sheet. Do they have this one? Okay, this actually shows you the reduction in force. This is the RIF sheet. The reduction in force is the 130 people that are actually being laid off. 63 community service officers, 2 clerical support aides, 5 correctional service counselors. You can read the list there. So that's a total of 130. And then we also put the 74 that were RIF'd last year. So you can see that for that total of 204 people who are being RIF'd, okay? So again, out of the 319 cuts, 204 over these past 2 years are people who are losing their jobs. In addition to that, there are multiple demotions. And you can see on this sheet that's coming around, this is the demotion list. And this goes back to what I was talking about before, the cascading effect. Okay? So you can see this year we're unfunding the Chief of Continuous Improvement. That position will be unfunded. The Assistant Chief at the Academy is unfunded. And 3 police sergeants are being unfunded. That was in 12. So we made all of those cutbacks and demotions and all of that last year. Then we also had people who had to revert from their position because they got bumped out by this cascading effect. And you can see the Assistant Chief of the Community Transition Center, 1 police lieutenant, 1 police sergeant. Now this year, we're eliminating these supervisory positions, 4 corrections lieutenants, 10 corrections sergeants, 1 correctional service program manager, and another correctional services supervisor. In addition to that, again, because of that cascading effect, we have 4 correctional sergeants positions that will have to be reverted. And then we're also going to unfund, again this year, the Chief of Continuous Improvement, the Chief of Community Affairs, the Assistant Chief at the Academy, the Assistant Chief of the other Assistant Chief of Community Affairs, and the Lieutenant in Community Affairs. And so that cascading effect, again, results in patrolmen being RIF'd when supervisors are demoted, okay? Now, I want to clarify one other thing that I've asked about, and that's what we've done on the expense side. That's all the things that we have been able to do to reduce expenses. Now, by doing that, I can tell you we're also going to be reducing services. Okay, community service officers, for example. I have met with Florida Highway Patrol. It is their responsibility to work traffic crashes on state roads in our county. Many counties don't work state road crashes at all and leave all of them to FHP. We have always, as a service to our constituents, we've always provided that service. We work those traffic crashes on state roads. We can no longer afford to do that. So we're working with them. We're going to ask them to step up and piecemeal this in zones 2, 3, and 4, which is basically Arlington, Mandarin, and West Side. We're asking them to work the traffic crashes on our state roads, just on the state roads, which is their responsibility anyway. And so that is one place that the public is going to see a cut in service. They're going to have to wait for FHP to respond to that crash. Now, they're going to try to increase their presence here, obviously. We're trying to concentrate in just those zones so that they're not spread out and they don't have a lot of travel time. But we're working with them now on how best to implement that. But we will no longer be working crashes on state roads in zone 2, 3, or 4.
Are they bringing more manpower on to deal with that because they have their own financial?
Yeah, we're talking to them about that. In fact, one of the things that we talked to them about was hiring some of our CSOs. Now, where all that's going to go, I don't know. That's a work in progress right now. But we're trying to minimize the impact on the public. But there's going to be impact. Now, the other area that we mentioned, and that is these special events where we've always provided all of this traffic service for free. The city cannot afford to do that any longer. Now that's 13 events. That's 10 Jaguar games, the Florida-Georgia game, the Gator Bowl game, and the Monster Truck. So we're going to have to, either the producers of those games are going to have to pay for that traffic, or there won't be any traffic control. In a lot of cities, that's the way it works. Police don't provide traffic in and out. You know, we were touted as the #1 city for traffic by the NFL, bringing people in and getting them out. But there's been a cost to that. We cannot afford that cost any longer, so we're not going to be doing that. We're also reaching out to the alarm industry. We're going to go to verified response on alarms. We'll no longer be responding to burglary alarms. Now, be sure people understand the difference between a panic alarm and a burglary alarm. A panic alarm is where somebody actually hits a button. They say, I'm getting robbed. Those we're going to. But 99.9% of our burglary alarms are false. We know that. The alarm industry knows that. We're no longer going until someone calls and tells us there's actually been a burglary. Or they can verify that. It's called verified response. It's all over the country. There is a mechanism that some of the alarm companies have already instituted themselves for verified response. They actually have a two-way communicator, and that's a great system. And so that will help facilitate that. But we can no longer afford to go to 99.9% of alarms that are false. So we will no longer be providing that service as well. Not to mention the service that we won't be providing at CTC, which I mentioned earlier. And I can tell you there's probably nothing more difficult to do than cut what is a tremendous program having impact in people's lives, a positive impact in people's lives at CTC. And when you look at those reductions in recidivism, they are significant as a result of that program. That will go away. Now, that, again, that's on the expense side and the service side. Those are the things that are going to be impacted. Now, here's what I'm calling for, though, on the revenue side. Look, on the revenue side, all I'm asking is that tax revenue remain constant. I'm not asking for a tax increase. I want tax revenue to remain constant. In other words, if somebody paid $1,000 last year in taxes, they would pay $1,000 this year in taxes. I'm not asking to raise their tax bill. I just want to bring in the exact same amount, keep that constant. If we do that, we will actually have an additional $24 million because our tax revenue has dropped $24 million. So we have a revenue problem because property values are going down, the tax revenues are going down, and all I want to do is keep the revenue constant with last year. I'm not asking to raise anybody's taxes. I just want their revenue to remain neutral. If we do that, that's $24 million. For $10 million of that, I can keep all of our CSOs and I can keep our CTC program up and running. We will still cut the other $12 million out of our budget that will benefit the city greatly, but won't impact nearly as much on public safety as $22 million in cuts. Now, part of the increase, and you're going to see the bottom line of my budget is still going up. Even with a $22 million cut that I just walked you through, cut in savings, we're still going to have our budget go up because just my pension increase is $27 million this year. My budget increase for pension, my expense went up $27 million. Now, That's something that's got to be fixed. Working with the mayor's office, working with the pension board, they have got to come to terms with these pension expenses. But we also need to be very clear about how we got here. And the fact of the matter is, the pension excess reserves that were generated for many years when the market was making more, the pension was making more than 8.25%. The city took that money out of the excess pension reserves and gave all of us an ad valorem property tax break with it. That's another sheet that I'll give to you in just a second. In fact, ask Linda for a copy of that sheet. I'm sorry, I meant to have that for you. But look, this mayor didn't take that money, this city council didn't take that money, but it's a problem now, and we've got to fix it. It's not this mayor's fault, it's not this council's fault, but it's also not the fault of these men and women in blue uniforms out there and their benefits. It's the way the pension was not funded in the past properly, and the way they took the money from the excess pension reserves. That's what's created this problem. And, of course, a crashing market. So I think if you go look at just about any pension in the country, they're all hurting because of the bad market. So that's why we have to make these cuts. That's why I'm asking to simply do the rollback, which would keep our tax revenue constant. And that's what I'm asking for. I'm not asking for a tax increase. I'm asking to keep tax revenues constant with what they were last year.
Sure. Just on that one, if I could ask you, because in your letter, and I know it's different verbiage, and that's what the difference is, it says I will be advocating for an increase in our property tax rate, which would be the rollback you talk about.
Yeah, right.
But the concern of people are, it's hard to get that rate back. How long would it last? You're looking at this year, would it ever come back down? And they just,
sure, you can allow rollback every year. You can allow rollback every year. And what that does is it rolls it back either up or down to collect the same amount of revenue every year. It's a balancing act so that people aren't paying more taxes, but they're not paying less either. But they're paying the same.
It's tough for you, it's tough for all your officers. They might appreciate a little break if the property value's gone down. What do you say to them?
I say measure that against standing on the roadway waiting 2.5 hours for FHP to show up at a traffic crash, or trying to get into the Florida-Georgia traffic pattern, or trying to, or having a loved one who needs in jail secure drug treatment and they can't get it. Look, bottom line is this: we can either have the reduced revenue, property tax revenue, or we can have the same service that we've had in the past. We cannot have both.
Will the public rally around your request? Do you think they will?
I think so, when they understand that we're not asking to raise their taxes. Their taxes will remain constant with last year. They won't pay a dime more. But the services that they are being provided now will remain. And that, I think, they will want.
Did you bring this up in your conversations with the mayor?
Yes, I did. And look, the mayor's been very clear. He's kind of, he's kind of put himself in a box. He said, I'm not going to raise taxes, I'm not going to raise taxes. And there are those who will say, well, this is raising taxes, although I disagree. We're keeping their tax revenue constant. But he is opposed to that. I understand that, and we respectfully agree to disagree. But I understand this: I'm responsible for those people who are going to be standing out there on the roadway, and I've got a responsibility to them, and I've got a responsibility to make sure that everyone understands that if we allow this reduction in revenue, there has to be a corresponding reduction in service. It has to happen. We cannot absorb any more of this. So if there's a reduction in revenue, there's going to be a reduction in services. I don't think the public wants that. I think the public wants a city where the police are able to respond to them at crashes, I think they want a city where we're able to take care of their loved ones who have drug problems and keep them from going back into that life of crime and going out and re-victimizing all of us over and over and over again.
What about council leadership, Bill Bishop? You talked with him and finance
Had a great
chairman.
meeting with Councilman Bishop yesterday, and he came over, he walked through this, and he said, John, I've never seen cuts like this. And I said, well, we've never had to make cuts like this. We've never had this expense and revenue crisis that we have today. And, you know, we're going to be working closely with them to get through this. And it really is up to the public. What level of police service do you want? And you either want community service officers and you want drug treatment for your loved ones, or you don't. And if they don't, then they'll let the revenue go down and the service will go down.
What about finance chairman John Crescent-Vinny and the rest of the finance committee?
Haven't met with them yet. We will be meeting I will be meeting with all of the council members individually to go over this. We've asked to meet with Councilman Crescent-Vinny a couple times. We're still, you know, we're working that out. But you know, everybody, look, we understand we've got to do our part on these cuts. And even if we get this stabilization of the revenue and make it constant with last year's numbers, we're still talking about cutting $12 million after we cut $17.7 million last year. So that's still 20 some odd million dollars that we're cutting in a 2-year period. Even if revenue, even if they do the rollback, and we get that 10 million to keep the drug treatment program and our CSOs going, that's still huge cuts. I mean, we're not bringing back everybody. We still got 12 million in cuts.
We've known about this kind of crunch in the budget for a little while now, be it in your office, citywide. Why is this really the first time we're pushing for the rollback? You know, why isn't this something that even after the last budget cycle kind of started to come on the radar?
Well, I think part of the problem was we had to get the actuarial on the pension. We didn't know how big the hole was going to be. That's why when we first met back in May, June, July, we made $11 million in cuts, and we thought that was going to be enough. But then the pension actuarial came back and created a much bigger hole in the city budget, and that's why you're hearing about it now. And plus, we had to figure out where can we make these cuts. I mean, because coming to these decisions has not been easy. These are tough cuts.
Sheriff, we have a Democratic mayor. You're a Republican. Normally the roles are reversed when we're talking about taxes. Are we teetering along any sort of party lines here with Republicans talking about increases, Democrats saying no?
No, look, I think this is more about what this community needs. And at some point, somebody's got to be a statesman and stand up and tell the community what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. I'm telling them what they need to hear. And what they need to hear is, unless they want these services cut, there is nothing else we can do. They're going to feel it. And it's going to impact on our crime numbers. And so I want to make sure that the people understand this going in, eyes wide open. And that's really why we're here today. And that this is not a tax increase. I'm asking to keep the tax revenue constant with last year. If you paid $1,000 on your mortgage, on your property last year, you're going to pay $1,000 this year. It's not an increase. It's a constant maintaining of that number.
What type of impact do you see this having on the crime rate? The crime rate is low now. A lot of the changes you're talking about will be waiting for people to show up for accidents, trouble getting to football games, quality of life things, but not crime things. What's the impact of crime?
No, but I think it does impact on that too. When you look at drug treatment, and you look at these recidivism numbers and understand that those who have a recidivism of 17% are going to join the group that now has a recidivism rate of 40%, that means more crime.
What's the financial impact of recidivism rates going up? I mean, on the flip side, you know, as that goes up, obviously you have more costs there, correct?
Yeah, well, yes, and not only in dollars, but in human suffering and property loss and all of that. So, look, we have the lowest crime numbers we've had in 40 years. I also don't believe that for a small reduction in people's tax revenue, they that they would want to see these kind of cuts. And look, we're talking about, I think the difference in the rollback is from 10.03 to 10.4. It's less than a half of a millage point to collect the same revenue that we collected last year. 0.4%. And I don't think for 0.4%, the community wants us to go backwards on public safety.
If a lot of people look, you address the rates of your appointed staff, what happens there, to the people that are being affected by this, the community service officers that are being laid off. I understand your trickle down, how that works, but they still look at salaries, they look at the appointments that you've made, even, I'm not talking about the nurses and everything that you referred to, and they say that's out of control. I mean, I'm just talking about people we're saying on the street, that there needs to be, they say the people that are being hurt on this are the people at the bottom, not your staff, not the appointed staff, and that salaries are out of control in that.
That's not true. It's not true. Look, you've got the list of everybody that's been cut. These are not just people at the bottom. That is simply not true.
So the people, when we hear that the community service officers are being let go, that are being actually laid off, when we hear the corrections officers that are being let go, those aren't the people at the bottom, those are people at the top.
No, those are people at the bottom, but you're not talking about the corrections lieutenants and the sergeants and
But they still have a
the
job.
assistant chief and the chiefs.
But they still have a job.
No, well, that's seniority. They cascade down. It's always going to be that way. But those positions are gone. That assistant chief position is gone. It cascades down. You're just talking about who's getting ripped.
Well, and I mean, that's
always last in, first out.
And I understand
that's the way
that.
the system works.
But they're also talking, and we hear this all the time, the high salaries that, you know, that your staff makes, all of that, can't there be cuts made in that way in salaries?
My staff salaries are not high. In fact, in Duval County, we spend less per capita on law enforcement than any other major county in the state. Not by a little, by a lot. Go look at the mayor's, not this mayor, but John Baden's own Fix It Now presentation. And you'll see we're spending about, and that's before all of these mammoth cuts for the last 2 years. So I think that's absolutely false.
Your letter talks about we cannot continue to follow a scorched earth approach to meeting revenue shortfalls. What do you mean by that?
I mean, we can't cut our way out of this. We are not going to cut our way to greatness. Look, we're trying to grow this city. We want people to come to this city. You think they're going to come without police services? I don't think so.
Sheriff, I know, TV stations offer to pay for radios. A lawyer came up with an idea of putting advertising on police cars, but the only source of revenue we have here is the red light camera.
Right.
Are there any sorts of revenue that we can look at besides this red light camera?
Well, we're not in the revenue generating business. That's not what we do. Now, you mentioned the ads on the back of police cars. Let me tell you the problem with that. You do not want to create an unholy relationship between law enforcement and somebody who's going to profit from us putting somebody in jail. That is a bad road to go down. We do not want that kind of relationship with attorneys in this community. So that's off the table. We are not doing that. Nobody should make money off of police putting them in jail. We shouldn't be able to make money off of putting somebody in jail. When you get into that situation, that creates a real bad relationship. We're not doing that. Now, you mentioned the police radios for media. That has nothing to do with the cost of it. That has to do with the legality of it. And that confidentiality for those people who are victims and those people who call 911. And that's why we cut out the radios. And we can't generate revenue at the expense of the public's confidentiality rights.
I know a few weeks ago when I was first asking you about the budget, you said you you would not have any more layoffs, you would fight like heck to
That's
keep
right.
that
I
from
said
happening.
we would not lay off any more police officers, and we're not. There's not a single police officer getting laid. We did police officers last year, and I told them we are not laying off police officers again. We can't afford to, and that's why these cuts in CSOs and corrections and civilians. We cannot lay off any more police officers.
You feel you gave it your best fight?
We absolutely did. Look, it's simple math. You know, the mayor didn't create this math. City council didn't create this math. It is what it is. And that's why if we allow this revenue to drop instead of remaining constant, then we have to have a corresponding reduction in services. That's all there is to it. You can't have the same service for less money. Not anymore, because we've cut all we can cut.
Is the pension issue something that actually can be solved?
Absolutely, I think it can be solved. Listen, the pension board sent a whole list of ways to reduce the pension expense to the mayor's office, and I think even to the city council. I'm not sure about that, but a whole list of things that can be done.
All of which went into effect 30 years from now, basically, when new hires retire.
No, there were things on that list that they could do tomorrow.
So do you expect pension costs to continue to increase next year?
No, look, that pension issue has got to be fixed, and I think they will.
Sheriff, I want to ask about some of the big events you mentioned. 10 Jaguars games, Gator Bowl, Monster Truck. I'm assuming probably we mean Jazz Fest and all of the events we do downtown in those areas. Is that
Right. Unless somebody pays for that service, I can't provide it.
so? In the past, you guys have pretty much done that for free and paid your officers the time and a half.
Exactly. And we can't do that. This city cannot afford that anymore. So the people that are making the profit on those events, they need to pick up that expense.
What happens if they don't? How bad do you think traffic will be when we're talking about a huge Gator Bowl weekend, Florida, Georgia, all of
Well,
those?
I think if you go to most major cities, what you'll see is they don't work traffic for those events. Actually, the NFL games are probably the least impacted because people know where they're going, you know, in those situations. So they park the same place. They do it 10 times a year, you know, that kind of thing. So it's not the same as somebody coming from out of town for the Florida-Georgia game who doesn't know a hill of beans about the traffic pattern down here. That's going to be a problem. Somebody's going to have to pay for that.
Where is that line item on this list here?
That's the 700,000. It is
Next question.
in the additional proposed budget reductions, 700,000 right here. Eliminate overtime for special events. Oh, thank you.
Sheriff, would anyone mind if I asked you to clarify one thing? That you're involved in the pension negotiation, there is no involvement?
Yeah, look, all I can do is use the bully pulpit. I am not involved in the pension negotiations, but it impacts my people, so I voice my concerns and my expectations about it. But I don't negotiate. What I'll give you here, I mentioned the revenue that was taken from the pension excess reserve fund over several years, and here it is. Again, I give you this just as background, understanding that, look, the mayor is not responsible for this. In fact, this city council passed an ordinance that they can no longer do this. They can't take this money anymore. Of course, the problem now is pension fund isn't making any money when they're investments. Nobody is, because of the market. But bottom line is, if you look at this, and this is not, what you see here is the police and fire pension fund. Then you have the general employees pension fund, because see, they took their money too. And this shows you the change in the millage rate going from 11.5 down to 9.65. And as they reduce that, you see through these years here, then you start seeing over here in these years, these are the dollars that they took to pay the pension with the pension's own money. Now, there's nothing wrong with that legally. I mean, they had every right to do it. But the point is, if that $274 million was sitting in pension reserves right now, we wouldn't be having this discussion. We simply pull on our reserves because the market's down, you pull on the reserves. But there are no reserves because they took it for 13 years. They took it. But this mayor didn't do it, this city council didn't do it. In fact, this city council fixed it a few years ago.
Sheriff, if you could, I just one more question. I know they all got the letter you sent, but you know they might be watching tonight on all the stations. You know, they're hearing this news, especially the community service officers, some of the jail staff. You know, no one wants to lose their job. What would you say to them as they try to find a new job? I know you said you were looking at FHP, but they seem to have to deal with this uneasy feeling of
Right.
do I have a job
Right.
year after year?
Right.
What would you say to them?
That's the nature of the situation we're in right now, the economic situation that we're in. I love these men and women. They do a tremendous job for this community. But the numbers are what they are as a result of not just the economy in Jacksonville, not just the economy in the United States, but the economy in this entire world. The world is in an economic slump. You all know that. It's on TV every night. Every 10th person out there is out of a job already. So they get it. They know how bad times are. That's how bad these times are. And that's why my plea to the community, the city council, is keep tax revenue constant. Keep the tax revenue constant. Allow me to keep these CSOs. Allow me to keep CTC operating. We'll make these other 12 million in cuts. But those two programs we need to maintain.
Well, with, like you just said, every 10th person out of the job here, I mean, a lot of hardship in,
Exactly.
some areas of our community. Some people may be, looking to a little bit of a break for a little extra money to give back to the city in some way, through purchasing or just other economic avenues that we may actually see that grow. So would taking that money away, I mean, are we talking about a long-term fix here by keeping the rate flat or giving them that break? Couldn't that actually get us more money long-term? Because people are going to have a little cushion here.
Well, we're not going to take any more money from them. They will pay the same tax bill they paid last year, this year. No difference. Paid $1,000 last year, you pay $1,000 this year. There is no difference. But if that tax revenue goes down, the service must go down.
But if some families are finding it harder to meet that same level,
Right.
what do you say to them, that the people who really need the break?
Well, I say we're not going to cut our way to greatness. This city is not going to cut its way to greatness. Look, we already saw in the 90s, from 90 to 2000, the number of people that work in Duval County but now live outside Duval County went up 45%. People are leaving this county because they don't want their loved ones dying in the carnage on our roadways. They don't want their family members getting murdered in their neighborhoods. And they want their children to go to school and get educated, not beat up and bullied. And they're leaving this community and they're paying a higher tax rate elsewhere than they are here. So if we want to grow this community, I think we have to provide the services that people want to live in this community.
You have some frustration expressed in this letter over internal service charges. The capitalization of no markup. Is there an implication there that you think the charges are being marked up?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I know that. Look, tires were marked up $600,000 one year. Just tires.
You think it is?
So, no, we're working on that. The city, look, this mayor, he gets it. We've had this discussion. He's like, you're absolutely right. We got to fix this. This whole cost sharing, cost spreading, when I cut 75 phone lines and my phone bill goes up, that makes no sense, and they get that. And so we've been working very closely with Karen Bowling, the mayor's office. We're working to fix that piece. Now, and let me make this point too, because I heard this reported, and it was wrong. Somebody said that last year to keep from laying people off last year, that we privatized fleet and our gas service. We asked for that, but we did not do that. That's why we carried these vacancies. So that, somehow that got misreported.
Are you still pushing?
We're still pushing to do that. Yes, absolutely. And I think that, I don't think, I know this mayor's office gets it, and they want to go that way as well.
You couldn't implement this year though, could you, at this point?
No, not in time. And look, I think if we privatize fleet, we're going to save a couple million probably. So, you know, when you're talking about trying to find 22 million, that would certainly help, because it's going to be a couple million. But that was not the sole answer either.
Sheriff,
I mean, we had to cut expenses.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I think a lot of people, when they read this letter, it's been out, I think, for the last 12 hours or so on all of our media outlets. They look at one thing, and it says in here, we talked about it earlier, where you advocate for an increase in property tax rate, but you say, no, it's not an increase. Explain how that works.
Well, it's not an increase in property taxes. The rate will go from 2.03 to 10.03 to 10.4. The rate will go up, but the tax revenue will remain constant. There is no increase in taxes. It's the same tax revenue, constant. You paid $1,000 last year, $1,000 this year. That ain't changing. That's what I'm asking.
Of that 24 million that would bring, you're saying the sheriff's office would look for 10, 12 million or so. With cuts across
10 million of that,
10
and we
million.
would still cut 12 million.
So with cuts, I mean, to all city departments here, why does this office get 10 million out of that 24?
Because we're half of the general revenue for the city. So we should get half of the cut, or the half of the savings.
I know last year the officers agreed to the pay cut and everything that happened there. In fact, got some money that I think you're giving back to the city now. Have you been watching what the fire department is doing with their negotiations now and trying to make it so there won't be any layoffs for them, as you know, they're actually offering more of a give back? Have you looked at that, and have you thought of the implications of that and what that would mean here?
Yes, and look, the fire department has cut or saved, same scenario that we go through. Whether it's a cut or a savings, it still helps lower the budget deficit. I think fire is over 19 million. So they're doing their part. They're doing their part. But these men and women, I'm glad you brought that up, Jim. These men and women took a 3% cut last year in their salary. Everybody.
And that would be for the next 2 years, right? The contract.
Yes, two more years. It was a 3-year contract. Correct.
And that was, you know, and that was their concern on that, to avoid any layoffs. They were willing to take more of a pay cut. At least that's what they're going to try to pass there. Didn't know if that's something that would fly here.
Well, I mean, you have to talk to, you know, Chief Centerfit and the others about what their needs are and that. I don't know. I'm having a hard enough time with mine. But
and Jim, just like you talked about with the pension, the sheriff doesn't negotiate that.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
How we doing, everybody?
Any other questions?
Anything?
That clear as mud?
Thank you very much, Sheriff. We appreciate it.
Hey, thank you guys. I really appreciate you coming over, because this kind of being able to sit down and really talk through the numbers. And the problem is, guys, when you try to tell the public, you know, I know it's convoluted, and to try and scrunch it down into, you know, a minute or 30 seconds of stuff. But if we can help, let us know.